Boom, bitches.
We are gathered here today to celebrate the love between two people whose lives were ostensibly brought together by the fated flap of a butterfly wing. It is all but impossible to explain why things happen the way they do. Our lives are like little baby crows, carried upon a curious wind, and all we can wish for our families, for those we love, is that that wind will eventually place us on solid ground. And I believe it's done just that for my family here in this little town in the middle of nowhere.
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay. And now I will ask David, Rose, and Patrick Brewer to exchange their vows.
David. I can't believe this is happening. I'm gonna keep this very short because I think you already know that I would climb 1,000 mountains for you. So I'll just say this. You will always be a part of me. And I'm part of you indefinitely. Boy, don't you know you can't escape me. 'Cause you know you'll always be my baby. And we'll linger on. Time can't erase a feeling that's strong. No way you're never gonna shake me. Ooh, darling, 'cause you'll always be my baby.
David.
Yes? Patrick. I've never liked a smile as much as I like yours. I've never felt as safe as I do when I'm with you. I've never known love like I have when we're together. It's not been an easy road for me, but knowing that you will always be there for me at the end of it makes everything okay. Patrick Brewer, you are my happy ending.
Hello. Well, what we've just watched is very, very familiar to me, as probably it is to most of you. And you'll be happy to hear that I am not alone, but I am about to be joined by Catherine O'Hara, by Eugene Levy, Annie Murphy, and Daniel Levy. There they all are. Hi.
Hey, Patrick.
Can I, first of all, I've got to put some cards on the table. This is only the second time that I've been what is called a moderator. And I'm very scared, but hopefully it will. However, I also want to tell you about Schitt's Creek, because my wife and I only started watching it about 2 months ago. And I don't watch much television. I wasn't really that aware of it. But by the second episode, I was hooked. And the last 48 hours have been spent watching in their entirety seasons 5 and 6, because we had got up to early season 4. So I have been living with you guys for, well, certainly for the last 48 hours. And now to have you on my computer screen is unnerving, and I have to say a little intimidating. And then I have one final confession to make, and then it's over to you, please. Last night I watched at 6:45 until 7:15, I watched the final episode of season 6. And I laughed out loud, something I have never done for any other show except yours, almost continuously throughout that episode, except when I was crying. And at one point, my wife, who didn't want to see the last episode because she's got a lot of other ones to see, asked me what was wrong. And it was your last episode that was hurling my emotions about from place to place. And now I'm going to shut up. But it means that what you have done to me in the last 2 months is not only bring vast entertainment into my life, but also admiration, because your show has a style that I don't think I've ever seen on a comedy show before. And you all share it in different ways. And one of the things that I'd love to ask you about, and maybe I should start with you, Catherine, is was this a plan? Did you discuss the matter of how styled the show would be, and therefore what your performances would be? Catherine?
No, I was not in on that. If that happened, I'm sure Daniel and Eugene could answer this much better as far as the style of the whole show. I will just say that they probably did this with everyone, and that is whatever ideas I had to offer, inspired by the script, of course, were welcome. They made me feel like whatever I had to offer was great and usable, or I should at least try it. And it just, from day one, it felt, like such a beautiful, positive way to work. It was really encouraging. So, with what they had in mind, Eugene and Daniel, um, they guided each of us. I would say, at least in my case, um, guided me and accepted and worked around whatever ideas I had that would fit in that. I don't know, is that true, Eugene, Daniel?
And
Yeah.
Eugene, can you tell me about the guidance?
Well, it was it had to be a character-based show, of course, which is what I've been doing pretty much my whole life. Even on SCTV, as broad as the characters were, you wanted to keep them, credible and grounded. And when we and that applied to the films that I did with Chris Guest, The Best in Show and Waiting for Guffman and La Di Da. Then Daniel, when he approached me with this idea, he said it was the kind of character work in these films is what he had in mind kind of for the show, to keep everything grounded and credible. And that was the big part of the thing. If you keep your characters so grounded, believable, and credible, then you have a very good chance of connecting with the audience in terms of an emotional involvement. And that's what the game plan was for me.
Thank you.
Danny.
But there was something else there. You speak about the performances being grounded. In fact, what first attracted me to the series was that there was a heightened quality about it, an intensity at times that rarely let up. There were moments of absolute relaxation where it was somewhat rare, and it was that heightened quality, because I've played so little comedy in my life. Oh, God. And on the occasions that I had, I found that there is nothing more pleasant than hearing an audience laugh or sitting in a room where other people are laughing. But
I've seen your commercial, and it's very funny.
Thank you. Well. Yes, that was one day for Mark and myself, and it was fun. I'm so glad that you think that, because literally it's almost unknown to me doing comedy. But Dan, the heightened, the grounded part that your father was talking about. Do you mind if I call him your father?
Sure. It is a fact.
How was that something that you also had in mind before you started shooting, that you wanted to talk to the cast about?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, as big as these characters were at times, when we were writing the show, we really asked ourselves with every decision they made, is this a plausible decision? Is this a real life choice that someone could make? As seemingly ridiculous as some of the characters could be, or as, you know, flustered as they could get, at the end of the day, as a writing team, we really asked ourselves with every major decision and every major choice that was made by these characters throughout the 6 seasons, does this feel human? Even though these characters are big and even though their reactions might be a little bit, you know, more lively than, you know, the common person you'd meet on the street, is what they're saying and is what they're doing plausibly human? And when it felt like we were pushing the boundaries of that, then we would rein it in. And I think that's what's allowed these characters to be as big as they are at times, is because at their core, who they are, their makeup, their brains are very much human brains. We weren't trying to make them, you know, as loud as they may be. They were still very human in the decisions and the choices that they made and what they said ultimately. And I think, just to add to what my dad was saying, you know, it's very important from the very beginning of making this show that the actors felt like they were contributing to what this show was, as opposed to stepping into something that was already conceived and simply executing lines that were written for a character. I remember sitting down before we even started shooting our first episode with Annie and with Emily, and sitting with them and walking through that first episode and asking them, is there anything in this episode that doesn't feel right? Is there anything that you have to bring to the table that you think might be funny or might add to who this character is? I think it was really a celebration of the actors and what they were bringing to the show, as opposed to presenting those actors with an idea and saying, hey, do this. And I think that's where you get a kind of personalization to these characters that feels really fresh, is because at the end of the day, from a writing team, we just wanted to showcase how brilliant this cast was. And we tried to do that and improve upon that and challenge that every season.
There was a lot of diversity in the emotional and mood atmosphere of the show, a lot of variety. In fact, things would change at times very quickly. And Annie, this was, I believe, very particular to you. What are your thoughts about that? Were you aware of the kind of extremes of emotion that could sometimes happen to you, to your character, in the middle of a sentence at times? Something would change.
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel so grateful to have been able to play such a character who was able to go through such extremes. I had so much fun doing that, and it really was. It was a real acting exercise, being Alexis, because kind of her unpredictability. But yeah, I am just so grateful that, and also not only just the like immediate extremes that she went through, but over the course of the show, she really did become a very, very different person. So it was a real joy to be able to play that whole kind of metamorphosis.
Well, it is riveting, Annie, what you do, and particularly in that last episode where the mood changes are so extreme, and always in everything that you all did, totally believable. There was never one moment when I would say, they wouldn't do that. Not at all. It was real. Catherine and Eugene, you have worked together in the past. What did that bring to Schitt's Creek, your previous working experiences?
Eugene?
Well, it definitely brought a degree of comfort into the work process because we're so familiar with each other by the time we started the show in terms of kind of how we work and what the expectation levels are. And that was, that was pretty much the key in terms of the history that we have, in working together. And I think it really, paid off, in the show. I think as Johnny and Moira rose, this marriage lasting so long, and going through what this family was going through now, I don't know if we didn't have that history, whether whether that would have come through the way it did if we were two people meeting, getting on a show, and just kind of starting up.
Yeah.
That familiarity, I think, really helped cement the roses.
I think too, Eugene, you are such a lovely gentleman that I think I might have, with another actor, made the choice of, badgering him every day about where, how he's gotten us into this. But I couldn't do that with you. You're just too lovely, and it made for such a more interesting and strong relationship that these two had. That they were a solid couple. They failed as parents up till now. They just sort of lost out. They lost their way as parents, but they were tight as a couple, and they were ready to lead the family when they had to, I think, because of Eugene and the love with which the show is written.
Yes. There's a very potent sense of need in all of your characters, and I think that was one. I sensed it was one of the things which provoked these wild emotional swings that could occur, which were always totally believable. The show, you mentioned the history of the show. It had a very modest beginning. Is that correct? In terms of its reception?
Absolutely. Yes.
And that was now corrected by 9 Emmy Awards and 4 for you, Danny. I assume it was all on the same day. I mean,
Yes.
that is very unusual, I think, for most shows. How did that in any way change what you were doing, or change your ideas or your intentions and objectives in writing, say, and directing?
No, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it only acted as a kind of motivator to keep doing what I was doing. I think we started the show with a much smaller audience than we ended the show with, and so for all of those years when we had a smaller audience, we were really going on instinct. We wrote all of our seasons before we shot them. They were all done in advance. They were never based on any kind of audience expectations. They were truly and purely just what our brilliant team of writers and I would come up with every season. And in that capacity, you have to kind of trust your gut. You have to trust your gut instincts in terms of making decisions for your characters that you think audiences will enjoy, but also that respect the characters and ground the characters and motivate the characters. And I think to end our show, to have our very last season met with the kind of response that we have, be it just viewership and then ultimately with the Emmy recognition, you couldn't script a better end. If it was pitched in a writer's room, it would be too broad. that's how lovely this whole experience has been. So for me, it just goes to show that, you know, if you stick to your guns and you love your ideas and you believe in your ideas, that people will find them. I think too often TV is written in an opposite effect, where people are writing for an audience instead of writing for themselves with the hopes that an audience will find and appreciate what they're doing. So it really did affirm this belief that whatever ideas come into my head, you know, just get them out there, and hopefully people will find them and like them.
And Joe, and let me just point out just how amazing that 4 Emmy night was for Daniel. I remember 2 years ago watching Phoebe Waller-Bridge, this picture of her with an armful of Emmys, and I remember thinking, God, what must that be like to have an armful of Emmys at the Emmys? And Daniel outdid her by 1 Emmy, but never got that image of an armful of Emmys because they only provided 3 Emmys at our location in Toronto that was kind of split with everybody who won. So that image never happened.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
unfortunately.
Dad, thanks, but that is a parent talking. We had a very good time.
Oh yeah.
And we're just grateful to be here. That's.
And note that we didn't let go of our Emmys to give them to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fine. Listen, I was just happy we were all able to be together on that night. That's all I cared about.
Wonderful. All right. So I wanted to ask about improv and improvisation, because there are moments in the show when the spontaneity of the reactions has a feeling of improvisation. Were you told you could improvise, or were you instructed, don't you dare improvise or change one word of the script? How was it? Annie, how was it for you?
Well, we would always, even though we had two of the world's greatest improvisers working on our show, we would always shoot to script first and foremost. So everything was scripted. And then, you know, being the fun set that it was, we were able, if we had an idea, usually, you know, a little button for the end of a scene or something like that. If we had an idea, we were more than welcome to throw it out there. Not to say that it would make it into the show, but we were certainly encouraged to you know, volunteer ideas. But yeah, for the most part, although even though it was scripted, Catherine in particular, as Moira, would just come up with the most outrageous pronunciation of words, and so that was improv in and of itself. And just so I think our reactions were often to that, just how her brain was able to make the word "how," for example, 3 syllables. How. So that was always kept us on our toes.
Someone has called your accent, Catherine, mid-Atlantic. Was that an actual objective of yours?
No, I don't know what my objective was, other than to, you know, I was afraid to, at the beginning, to make a bad choice for a character, and we ended up, you know, with Eugene and Daniel's blessing and great scripts, ended up developing a character that was completely inconsistent in every bit of dialogue, which was so fun to play. But no, the best thing I heard about my accent was there's a site in Australia where they hired a speech expert to analyze Moira's accent, and they said they discerned that she had never spoken English until the age of 8 or 9.
Is that true?
Sure. No, now I excuse it as, you know, our world travels, Johnny and Moira's world travels, how, you know, as an actor, I've absorbed everything in the world, and now what you're hearing are oral mementos of our world travels. That's what I'm sharing with those lucky enough to be in my presence.
Improvisation was always alien to me. At drama school, I was dreadful at it. I embarrassed myself. I embarrassed my teachers. Um, and a few years ago, a group called the Improvised Shakespeare Company. I'm sure you've seen them and know what they do. I saw them and was dazzled by them. And the next thing I knew, I had agreed to do a show with them, even though improvisation was impossible for me. But the leader of the group said to me, "There's only one thing you really need to know about improvisation. Only one thing. Listen to everything and then respond to it." And of course, that's a fundamental of how we perform anyway. Eugene, have you been directed by Daniel before?
No. No.
Only as a
I
bossy
haven't.
teen.
I what?
I said only as a bossy
no,
teen.
oh yeah. Well, I was thinking that at home. Maybe. No, I think when we did the kind of pilot episode, our presentation pilot, which was kind of a slightly different animal. I remember doing one scene, and the first time Daniel, it was a scene with Catherine I was doing, and he came in to the set, cautiously came in to the set and tapped me on the shoulder and said, I think you're doing this, but I think you should try doing it this way, trying to do that. And he was kind of whispering in my ear very softly. And I thought what I was doing seemed right, but I trust him, and I did it his way, and that was ultimately the way to do it. And that was the very first time I actually got a note on an acting note from him, and from that point on, I listened every time he came on the set with a suggestion. I have a lot of trust in my son, and that happened pretty much right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm. I have a son whose name is Daniel, who's an actor and a director and a teacher.
Wow.
And he has directed me at times, and and he could be ruthless with me. Now that may say something about our relationship, but he could be so tough and irritated by what I was doing. Finally I decided, well, he's just having his revenge on me from, when I was tough on him when he was a child. And I did wonder, could have been anything similar between the two of you. But
there was,
yes, go on, Dan.
I remember one scene where it never got, it never got bad, but I remember the scene where you're walking back and forth and Alexis was studying and Johnny was helicopter parenting Alexis's studies, trying to make sure that she was doing a good job in her schooling. And we were building this kind of gag where Johnny was passing back and forth across the archway of the doorway. And I remember and I knew that my dad has an aversion to the note of just take it a little bit bigger. I know that there's a sensitivity to the note of go a bit bigger, but in this moment I was like, I gotta go there. So I wandered in and I was like, well, do you think we could maybe just amp up the energy just a touch? We got to get him going across the door frame a little bit faster. And I know that it seems really natural, but it's just on camera. Anyway, so we did it. Wasn't fast enough. Had to come back in again. Yeah, if we could just, I know it. I know that it feels natural. I just need it a little bit bigger and a little bit faster. Okay, and I can always tell because his lip would sort of get a bit serious, and he'd go, I feel like we're going pretty fast, but I suppose I could go a little bit faster. Thank you so much. If we could just energy up and fast. And and it, and in the end, we got there, and I'm sure it
Yeah.
was incredibly unnatural, and it was absolutely torturous for me to do because I knew that I was really sort of poking the bee's nest a little bit.
But it's funny when I did look at the alternate takes um, after the fact, it was true. It was just I was too slow going across. It wasn't working, and my energy seemed a little low
Mhm.
to make that work. So it's good to have that little angel on your shoulder, kind of telling you the better way to do things.
Yeah. Um,
That's great.
I think it was Noel Coward who said comedy is a very serious business. And I've never fully understood that, but one of the great charms of Schitt's Creek is that there is, from all of the principal characters, including Patrick and Stevie, that their emotions are almost running away with them. And then just as suddenly they can become very still and very quiet. What about the physical side? Because Annie, I was fascinated by you physically, your gesturing and the angles
What do
of
you
your
mean?
head,
What do you mean?
and I and uh, and Daniel could be very similar. Did you ever compare sort of physicalities and say, well, we are brother and sister, and we should maybe have the same kind of gestures?
There was never an official discussion. I think I've come to the realization that we just kind of stole bits and pieces from each other as time went on. Um,
Ah,
I Yeah, I think I was impressed by what Dan was doing and wanted in on the action, and I think he saw some things that I was doing that he liked, and we're just passing it off as sibling similarities. But really, it was
yes,
just full thievery.
And the great thing about what we were able to sort of do in terms of the thievery that existed between our stealing each other's choices, was that ultimately these siblings had never really been very close before. And normally for families that are all sort of self-contained, for brothers and sisters that grow up quite close to each other, there are these kind of mannerisms that they pick up from each other because it's just social osmosis almost. And so it was sort of fun, I felt. And, we clocked certain things, obviously, specifically that we would pick up on from one another, but it helped with this sense of captivity almost that these people were, confined to this, two adult people confined to this one room, forced to sort
yes,
of live. And as a result, you would kind of pick up on the mannerisms. And we did try to write, in at times, similar, the way that they express themselves, the sort of the dialogue. We tried at times to really mimic each other so that you did get that closeness, and we were able to kind of build over the seasons a parallelism in terms of their experiences together versus when they were apart. So in a way, it was cheap in the sense that we took some things from each other, but it just added to that richness of how this would have naturally sort of worked out for these two people. The fact that they would have started to talk the same and act the
yes,
same, and
yes.
I think their mirroring of each other really came from a mutual admiration and love for each other, whether they wanted to admit that or not.
Yes. Well, it is evident in what you both do, and I was very, very attracted to it. Can we talk a little bit about costume design? Because three of you had all kinds of extraordinary garments to wear, and Eugene, you had a suit, and
Comfortable.
yeah, of course, of course.
Yes.
Deborah, I can't remember your costume design was Deborah
Hansen.
That's right, Deborah Hansen. I was she responsible for everything that you wore, Catherine?
I think she would second this, that she and Daniel both shopped all year online to try to get deals for extremely high-end wardrobe for all of us. And I would say that it was probably Daniel that, and maybe Daniel and Eugene started the idea of us always dressing to represent the world that we used to live in, and to say we are going back to this world. Especially in my case, I'm going back to this world. I'm going to continue. This is who I am. And we never had to remind the audience from show to show of what their lives used to be, because you just look at us walking down the streets of this town and you know where we came from and where we hope to be again. But yeah, those wardrobe fittings were the most fun I've ever had in my life. Yeah, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I hope that you were able to keep some of those garments.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Levy.
Yes.
My favorite one was, they looked like huge black earmuffs. And I think there was something that went over your head, and then there were enormous black, kind of netting things around your ears. I don't suppose you've still got those, have you?
I don't. I'm thinking of the crows. After I came back,
They were crows.
making everybody watch clips from the Croning Part 3. What was it called? Those were actual crows on my head. Thank you. I said, have these been demited, please? Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I found it online. It was a headpiece that someone had made on Etsy, and I had gone there a lot when we were trying to find accessories for Moira, because you could get these like artisanal sort of headpieces and costume jewelry. And when I knew the summer before we started shooting, we had been writing the season in advance, and I knew that this Crow movie was going to take place, and so I started just casually looking for Crow accessories on the internet, and came across this headpiece, which was essentially, to your point, yes, it looked like earmuffs, but they were two black birds that sort of sat on opposite side of her head. And I was instantly like, how do I buy this? Get it now. And like a lot of the clothes, that I would buy throughout the year, because we simply just couldn't afford to buy them all at once, I brought that back in a giant sort of hat box across the border. Fortunately, nobody cared. But it would be I had to sort of go through how I would explain that to a customs official, that the birds were clearly sort of fake and not real dead birds I was carrying across the border. But yeah, we had so much fun when it came to costuming the show. And, as someone who is very allergic to writing exposition for actors, the clothes, I think, did such a great job of telling their story without us having to get into the nitty gritty of their wants and needs, and writing sort of, useless expositional dialogue about who they were. I mean, they just expressed it through what they put on every day. So it in a way, it was me being a lazy writer, but also it was just such a fun way of revealing character without having to write it.
And did you ever just rent clothing, garments, costumes, or were they all purchased and put into
fur
a
hat? We had to
wardrobe?
borrow. We borrowed a. I'm sorry. We borrowed a fur hat, right?
No. Yeah, toward the
Oh,
end of this, toward the ends of the show, when certain designers were starting to pay attention to it and were amused by it, we would get lent clothing. So in the rare occasion, we had some designers that were, I believe it was Mark Fast that lent us a lot of like the big sort of Russian black furry hat
Yeah.
that Moira wore, and some of the more sort of couture pieces that we were wearing, the more expensive pieces were on loan. But for the most part, it was vintage. It was like finding them on consignment shops and hoping that no one spilled any tomato sauce on them because we only had one. We didn't work with
Yeah.
doubles. They were all we could only afford sort of one go at each look. So, and in the 6 years, we never had a problem. We never had a rip. We never had a tear. Our costume team was so extraordinary in terms of preserving these clothes because they, granted they were terrified of doing anything to them because we only had one. So,
We're beginning to draw to a close, but I'd like to ask each one of you, um, what impression, what memory of those 6 years and 6 seasons will stay with you the longest? Which one really had an impact? Daniel.
oh goodness. I think it was a cumulative thing. I think for me, it shaped for this to be my first scripted television show, and to have been surrounded by the cast and crew that we had, it will inform and it has informed the standards with which I know that I will be working from here on out. What I how to create an environment on a set that feels fun and supportive and encouraging, making sure that you are challenging your actors so that they come back every season feeling inspired to keep going and they don't feel like they're just putting the old shoes back on and nothing's really changing. It was so crucial to make sure that our actors came to work and looked at their scripts week after week and saw change and growth and excitement in who they were going to play. And then at the same time, I think, working with my dad and Catherine as the 1 and 2 on the show, and watching the respect and the humility and the grace and the skill with which they showed up to work and made everyone feel comfortable and at ease. There was no egos at work. We never had to contend with shouting matches and people storming off set. It was such an incubative place to work. It was such a supportive place to work. And I know for a fact that was a direct result of them setting a bar for everybody and no one could cross it. And when that's your, when that's what's up top, everybody has to follow suit. So for me, the great takeaway is just knowing what it's like to be inspired every day when you come to work and hoping that I get to recreate that moving forward.
I'm sorry, did you say that this was the first television script that you had written?
Yes.
That's astonishing. Catherine, what about you? What stays with you?
oh, I agree with Daniel. It's a cumulative. Um, the but culminating in the wedding scene in the last show, not only to see this beautiful relationship uh, continue on such a happy note, but also after playing somebody who never let go of the desire to get out of this town, to look around and as Moira and myself realize, oh my Lord, how much I'm going to miss all of you, and I do.
Annie.
Oh, I'm feeling a little verklempt. Which Dan will be happy to. Oh, Catherine's having a cry. Okay, good. I
brought this
I
just in case.
think I think I mean, so many moments over those 6 years will stay with me for forever. But I think I think our last day of shooting will be kind of something that flashes before my eyes as I'm dying. Just it was the scene where the kids are saying goodbye to Johnny and Moira was the last scene that Dan and I ever shot on the show, and I think it was a very large realization that not only were we saying goodbye to these characters who I've just been so mesmerized by over my time on the show, but saying goodbye to very good friends, and just being surrounded by this crew and wonderful cast of characters that I'd grown to love so deeply over the years. Yeah, and I miss them all very much too.
Eugene.
Well, yes, I mean the last season was, coming to a close on the last season was really kind of gut wrenching. And those are memories that will, never fade, because it's an experience, a working experience, number one, that I don't believe I've, had before this happened. But, show memories for me, I mean, in a very endearing and heartwarming way, where all the scenes that we did as a family in the motel rooms are kind of the most joyous and the most memorable, because we were watching each other grow from the very first show. Where I'm screaming at David, help me with the door. Well, I just got out of the shower. Help me with the door. It's air drying. From that to, David, could you come in here? What do you want? Well, just come in here. Well, what do you want? Well, just come in here. Well, we can talk from here. That family growth from those beginnings to where we ended up, and they pretty much all happened for us in those motel rooms. So that will always, those scenes will always kind of stay in the heart.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we have to draw to a close now. I want to thank the four of you for agreeing to put yourselves at risk by talking to me. And I have one thing left to really look forward to, which is that when my wife finally gets to season 6, I can sit down with her and watch the entire season all the way through again, which I look forward to so much. The work of all of you, I believe, was inspirational in this series, and there is nothing else that I shall appreciate and love and look forward to as much as I did Schitt's Creek. Thank you.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
Thank
Well,
you.
Wow.
you.
Patrick.
And
Thank you so
it
much.
goes without saying that having you here has been such a gift to all of us, and we have been so excited knowing that you were coming and doing this. And I speak for myself, but you have been around my life forever, and to be here and talk with you has been such a lovely, lovely gift to me, and I'm sure to all of us.
He speaks for me too. Yeah. Very much.
And I echo that. One of the most exciting moments for us was when we discovered, I think on a tweet possibly, that you were a fan of the show, and we just, we all kind of flipped out. It was and you're really quite good at this, Patrick. So
Really good.
Oh, really?
Really good.
Well, keep
Yeah.
that in mind, if you would, Eugene. And, I'm always ready for a second career to open up. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope I get to put my arms around you in the flesh and hug you and tell you how much I love what you do and who you are. Thank you.
Thank you
Well,
very
thank
much.
you, sir.
Thank you, Sir Patrick.